So, the new Legend of Zelda game is out, and from what I've been hearing on the internet is that it's pretty good. Who am I kidding? It's the Legend of Zelda. Of course it's good. As if there's ever any doubt. But this has a lot of perfect scores. To which I say, really? I wonder if they played this one all the way through. And don't get me wrong, this is a good game. Nay, this is a great game. And I love this franchise. And I'm not trying to be that guy that has to be different, who has to hate on what's popular. Man, screw that guy. But I do have some problems with this game that bother me enough that if I were to give out numbered scores, well, let's just say it wouldn't be perfect. Which is kind of a problem, because I fear what the effect of all those perfect scores might end up having on the future of the Legend of Zelda franchise. And oh boy, where to begin? Well, if you're a gamer, and you haven't been living under a rock, odds are that you're well aware of the launch of Nintendo's newest console, the Switch. And of course, its big name launch title, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. A game that I suspect many of you probably own by now. And if you don't, it's probably because you fall into one of three camps. Either you want it on the Switch so you have the best game for the system right out the gate, and you're just waiting to actually get your hands on the system. Seriously, has anyone noticed how many copies of Zelda on the Switch there are at stores? I mean, come on, Nintendo. Why would you send out that many more copies of the game than there are of actual systems? The other reasons being that you don't have a Wii U to play it on, which is a shame, really. I think it's a pretty underrated system. And of course, the third reason you might not have the game is that you don't like The Legend of Zelda. So yeah, what I'm not so subtly trying to say is, this game's a pretty big deal, and it's hard to imagine anyone not owning it by now. And despite only being 1/3 of the way through, I think we're probably looking at 2017's Game of the Year. Especially since the critics will probably be the ones making that call. And as the Wii U's final swan song, it's a pretty good way to go out in a giant blaze of glory. And what a beautiful blaze it is. I mean, just look at this game. It's gorgeous. Easily one of the best worlds gaming has ever seen, hands down. And all on weaker hardware. Yeah, forget about the specs, forget about the processing power, because in the end, none of that really matters. Well, except during the occasional frame rate drop, but it's not a major problem. And regardless, if there's one thing that Nintendo truly excels at, it's making the most of what they got, and making it look timeless. I'd bet that in 20, maybe even 10 years down the line, when all of today's hyper-realistic games look dated, trapped in the cusp of the uncanny valley, Breath of the Wild, and probably other Nintendo stylized games, will still look amazing. But that's a ways off. Let's admire the now. Towering mountains, endless fields, gaping canyons, burning deserts. This world has so much to see, and it all looks fantastic. And oddly enough, and this may really sound weird, but just follow me here, but just look at the grass in this game. And no, I am not making a joke. See for yourself. Look at how this same grass, yeah, it is all the same, changes with the tides of time. There were literally moments when the light would be coming in at just the right angle, and the grass echoed the feeling of the world. And I just had to stop and breathe it all in. Stunning. If grass looked this amazing IRL, well, I don't think we'd ever have to worry about mowing the lawn again. Sorry, little Timmy. Guess you'll just have to make money this summer some other way. Huh. You know what? They actually removed that from this one. An odd bit of Zelda heritage to remove, but it kinda makes sense when you stop to think about it. Yeah. Another thing worth mentioning is that the presentation alone isn't the only feat this game has to boast about in the graphical department. No, The sheer vastness of the world itself is just amazing. I mean, really look at it. Those mountains and hills in the background, they aren't a skybox. They're not just some picture. They're real. You can actually go there. In fact, this world is so huge that it literally takes hours to traverse it. And I still haven't explored it all. There's just too much here. And the way this world is designed really feels like Nintendo spent hours upon hours meticulously building it, piece by piece. And every time I'm ready to put the controller down, I end up just spotting another formation, another possible hidden gem. And I just want to explore even more. It's so addicting. And honestly, it just speaks miles of the Wii U and the potential it barely got to scrape. Yeah, that's right. The footage you're seeing right now isn't from the Switch. I am playing on the Wii U, the system this game was made for. And let's get serious here for a moment. If this game had launched on the Wii U, well, I doubt that the Switch would even be a thing yet. So if you got a Switch or plan on getting it and just want to pick up the best title for it, I get it. But just so you know, the Wii U version is just as good, for those of you who might be on the fence about it. Because realistically, this game was made for the end of a console cycle, when the limits have been fully explored and can be pushed even further beyond. And while I haven't personally compared them, I doubt there's any real difference between the two versions anyway. But speaking of the similarities between the two versions, let's talk about the similarities it has with the other games as well, starting with the music. Do I really have to say that the music in this game is great? It's the Legend of Zelda. There is literally a live symphony that travels around multiple countries playing this music. The show is called The Legend of Zelda: Symphony of the Goddess, and let me tell you, I have been twice, and it is amazing. And since they're adding Breath of the Wild, I absolutely recommend you check it out. And, while you're at it, maybe check out Symphonic Evolutions. It's pretty awesome too. But what's this I hear? There's another sound. One distinct to this Legend of Zelda. Could that be voice acting I hear?
Impressive, I know.
So, in this game, well, most of the dialogue is still traditional text. During some of the cutscenes, characters actually have voices. And I mean real dialogue. And they play well with the characters' personalities. And honestly, if you ask me, it's about time. The characters in the Zelda series have always been so full of life in both their design and their behavior alone. But allowing them to express their characteristics vocally really only ups the ante, and I think it was a pretty logical step. Even if whether you like them or not is more of a personal choice.
Hey, excuse me, princess.
Except Link. He is still a mute, and realistically, probably will be forever. Especially after previous attempts.
It's okay, I know. Your silence speaks volumes.
And while I do understand the reasoning, Link is essentially a placeholder for the player as opposed to his own character. Everyone has probably imagined what his voice would sound like, so any chosen voice will probably never be able to live up to the expectations. I mean, it's probably the same reason why we'll never hear Gordon Freeman's voice or see Master Chief's face. But as far as Breath of the Wild is concerned, I kind of feel like Link being a mute actually works against the game this time. Now have no fear, I am not going to spoil anything. But basically, this time around, Link has a history. He's not just a hero that shows up and saves the day. People in this world know who he is. They have a history with him. They mean something to him. And that's actually explored a bit. And the fact is that during these cutscenes, it's kinda awkward that these characters are, well, opening up to Link. And he's not responding. In fact, he's not even emoting. This reaction he gives is about as much personality as he ever shows in the game. I just really don't like it. But surprisingly, if you find Zelda's diary, this issue is actually brought up. In text. Seriously, that's some weak sauce. Show, don't tell. Especially when you compare that to every other character in the game. I mean, just look at how this shop clerk reacts to me not having on the proper gear. Or this random lady does when I stepped on her flowers a few too many times. Yeah. Despite the incredible presentation this game puts out there, this is just a major sore spot that really makes no sense at all. And I mean, Wind Waker Link emoted, Skyward Link emoted, so why not this one? And again, it ruins the emotion of the scene and honestly, kinda makes Link a bit unlikable. I mean, for example, there's a character in the game who died fighting by your side. And for everyone who's played this already, yeah, I know, I'm trying not to spoil stuff here. And the thing is, when you meet his ghost, he apologizes for dying. And keep in mind that even as a ghost, he is still fighting by your side. Still helping you. Plus, he was Link's friend. But Link doesn't even seem to bat an eye at this. He's just a walking blank Sheikah slate. Which I guess is how the creators wanted it to be? But I'm pretty sure that by design, most of us at least picture Link as the humble hero. I would have much preferred him to express gratitude towards his friend for his sacrifice. Or, you know, expressed anything at all during any of these scenes. Even if he didn't have any dialogue, he could have still emoted a little bit. Frowned, maybe. I don't know, it was just such a grievous misstep. And you know what? I still have plenty of praise left to shower this game with. But while I'm still complaining, I'm just gonna go ahead and get another issue off my chest. And while the whole emoting thing is technically personal preference, might not bother you at all, but something I think we can all agree on is that the controls kinda suck. Oh, but not in the way we're all used to with bad controls. Shocking. No, the problem here stems from two uniquely odd sources. First, a complete lack of touchscreen use. Odd, I know, but the whole touchscreen thing was kinda the whole point of the Wii U controller. And aside from playing on it instead of the TV, it seems to serve no purpose. And while I can't speak for the Switch, I'm pretty sure it follows suit. But what it does use is the gyroscope for aiming. And considering the bow works like any gun in a third-person shooter, this often ends up catching me off guard in the heat of battle, when my reticule moves in tangent with my controller and not my joysticks. So I just said screw it and busted out the Pro Controller. The only other option, by the way. Yeah, the game case lies, the classic controller is not compatible. Don't be fooled. Now, while the Pro Controller did help, it doesn't solve the other problem, the button mapping. Now, this may sound like nitpicking, but just follow me here. There are only two control schemes in the game, and both of them have the run and jump buttons opposite of one another. Meaning, you can't hold down run and press the jump button while moving. And sure, Link stays running for a moment after you let go of run, but it just feels wrong. And really, can you blame me? I mean, it's just been ingrained into my gaming muscle memory after so many years. Of course, I couldn't tell you how that happened. Another odd choice is the menu interface. Again, sounds like I'm nitpicking, but you use the menu in this game a lot more than any other Zelda title, due to in part the whole weapon swapping mechanic. And I'm sure you've all seen the memes by now. Yeah, I've seen Princess Peach avoid capture longer than these weapons last. So, navigating the menus happens a lot. But changing from page to page isn't the shoulder buttons. At least, not the inventory pages. You know, the ones most frequented. It's the right analog stick. It's just awkward. And even in combat, how you switch between utility, bows, blades, it all just felt so off. Playing through the entire campaign, it took me hours of playing before it really locked in. And I've played Zelda with so many different control schemes and setups, so if I'm having trouble, I can't imagine it's just me. But I haven't heard or seen any complaints in other reviews, so I'm hoping you all will tell me. Let me hear your thoughts about that down in the comments below. Honestly, if only the game had given you the freedom to map the controls any way you pleased. But, you know, speaking of freedom, it's probably the biggest draw to this Zelda game, with the way you get to progress often being compared to games like Skyrim, where you don't just have to do the main quest. You can go off and find your own adventure. Because the world is just so massive and there is just so much to see, you can literally spend hours just traveling the landscape alone. And a big part of that is thanks to how the series has evolved. Think about it. In most previous Zelda games, progression has always been, well, kinda linear. You needed special items obtained from one dungeon just to reach the next. But just like in the excellent A Link Between Worlds, all the puzzle solving items are basically handed to you right out the gate, so you can just be on your way, uninhibited. And the ability to venture wherever you please, tackle any dungeon you want in any order, it isn't just a new concept starting with Between Worlds. Oh no, it goes so far back. This game really does manage to recapture the spirit of adventure that the original Legend of Zelda invoked all the way back then, by pretty much just tossing you out into the wild to fend for yourself. For better or worse. That is to say, it really is just you out there exploring. No nagging fairies telling you to listen, or obnoxious sword spirits reminding you that air is required for breathing. Yeah, I think Nintendo got the message after that little backlash. So for the first time in a 3D Zelda game, ever, Link is flying solo, both figuratively and pretty much literally too. Though ironically, this might have actually been the first game that a sidekick character might have actually come in handy. Nah. But now what am I gonna do with all these navies? This game really does add a lot of new mechanics, most of which are great, like foraging for ingredients and cooking up health items. And between the tips at the loading screen and the way the game is paced, and just the fact that most materials and mechanics work like how you think they would, you know, electricity spreading through water, fire burning grass, you know, stuff like that, it's manageable. There's even stuff you might not think about, like how fire creates an updraft you can use. Pretty cool. And really, discovering new mechanics is part of the adventure. Though, I just gotta throw this out there now, not all of these new mechanics are fun. The rain, as great as it looks, is a drag because it makes climbing nearly impossible and just halts your progress for really no reason at all. I genuinely hate how much it rains in this game. Remember when Link could control the weather? Yeah, I miss that. And that whole lightning striking you during a storm thing that got everyone clamoring up to the game's release? I hate that too. I hate that so much. It's like nature is constantly trying to kill me. And avoiding it when I only have metal weapons kinda sucks too. Like that time when I unequipped all my stuff to keep from being blasted, and it all promptly rolled down the hill into the nearest river. What are you doing here, Fee? You are not in this game. Okay, so you know how I can avoid getting hit by lightning then. Yeah, I did not miss you at all. And speaking of improvements, I gotta say, the puzzles in this game are probably the best the series has ever seen, and are interestingly incorporated into the exploration aspect of the game. As opposed to just being a large group of them in a single dungeon, though there is still that too, but unlike the usual 8 dungeons that are the norm for most Zelda games, this one only has 4. But the majority of the puzzles in this game exist via the shrines. Shrines are like mini dungeons and are spread out across the world, and you have to hunt for them. And for small glowing huts, some of them are actually pretty well hidden. In fact, you can't move past the first area of the game until you've completed 4 of them. I thought, oh, well, this'll be easy. The old man at the beginning said we're stuck up here on a plateau, so they can't be that hard to find, right?
2 hours later.
Oh my god, this world is too big. But finding and activating these shrines gets you a piece of heart container or stamina container. They also create warp points for you to use for quick travel, giving them even more value, making them pretty worth tracking down. But back to the puzzle aspect. Most of these shrines are just small areas with a themed puzzle for you to solve. I think it's best to think of them as a single room or area from a traditional Zelda dungeon. What makes these puzzles stand out is while they still have a lot of the traditional lever, find key, and move stuff mechanics that most of the games have, this time around, the puzzles really take advantage of the physics, with some of them being straight up physics puzzles. Some use momentum, others take advantage of in-game materials like how wood burns or how electricity flows through metal, and I especially like how the special items are used this time around, particularly the magnet and the time stop, because they open up so many different ways for working around some of these solutions. Take this one for example. In this shrine, the idea is to adjust the wind to get the ball to travel across the room into this hole. The point is so that you'll have enough time to get to the plateau before it activates. Yeah, I just said screw that. I put the ball on the edge of the hole and froze it in time as it fell, and just skipped everything. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I really enjoyed the freedom and creativity that each puzzle brings to the table, especially when you compare that to the combat. The combat in Breath of the Wild is easily the most frustrating in the series to date, but not for how it plays, because the actual combat is actually pretty akin to other 3D Zelda games. Locking on, side strafing, items, parries, it's all here. Furthermore, against the right enemies, battles can be pretty intense. But what really kills it is how it has to accommodate to the new mechanics. But let's talk about what works first. Combat in this game offers a lot of options for how you want to go about handling it. The game really wants you to be smart and strategic about how you fight, especially about how you engage. This ranges from obvious stuff like using weapons with the right elemental attributes to simpler things like assassinating enemies while they sleep. But there's also the more creative stuff, like setting fire to the grass around them, luring enemies away with food, or just dropping boulders on them. Though personally, I found that the best strategy for dealing with most enemies is to just not fight them at all. Fighting in this game is a real chore due to 2 major factors. First, the balance. Because this game is trying to be as non-linear as possible, enemy difficulty, or more accurately, enemy damage output, is all over the place. Never before in a Zelda game, well, excluding Zelda 2, have I died so many times. And while I could chalk up a few of them to carelessness, most felt pretty cheap. It is just so easy to be one-shotted by a basic enemy out of the blue, especially early on. And I had no idea that would happen. I mean, as far as the enemies go, most don't look that strong. It's like, sure, when I see the giant laser shooting spiders, yeah, I know to steer clear. But basic moblins? Come on. And it's just a problem throughout the entire game. Even at the bosses, it didn't seem to matter which order I tackled the temples in. I pretty much needed to heal after every single time I took a hit. It was infuriating. Especially because it made me constantly feel like my hours and hours of progress meant nothing at all. And adding to that effect are the weapons. Oh my sweet Hylian princess, the weapons. They are arguably the worst part of this game, doing more than just breaking, but possibly breaking a key element to the Legend of Zelda feeling as a whole. Yeah, it's that much of an issue. Now, I'm sure you've all heard about this already, but the weapons in Breath of the Wild suck because they wear down and break. The swords, the shields, and even the bows. And they break so fast and so often. Christ, it's like fighting with cardboard. I'd wager a stale baguette would last longer than these things. It's pathetic. And what really makes this a problem is that, well, when you do find good gear, you don't want to go wasting it on some worthless enemies. And Worthless is right. Odds are that any loot they're guarding isn't better than what you're going to find in the shrines anyway. So really, why bother? Or what about these annoying skeletons that keep popping up? What do they have to offer? After only a few hours in, I found myself adamantly trying to avoid any and every fight I could, just so I didn't have to waste any good weapons. And even the Master Sword is not immune to this BS. Though instead of breaking, it just has to recharge for 10 minutes. Real time. The Master Sword, the legendary blade that banishes evil, arguably the greatest weapon in gaming history, sucks in this game. I just can't even. It's absurd. What's worse is that every single boss had me on edge, but not because of the difficulty, though the damage I was taking was not helping the cause, but because I was afraid that all my gear would break before I finished the fight. How lame is that? And it's a real shame too, because I love the fact that the enemies in this game are a genuine threat. But I'd much rather be worrying about them than my cheap gear. But here's a pro tip for you all. Don't bother. There is literally no reason whatsoever to save your good gear. Just trust me on that one. Just use it. But as I said before, what really sucks about the weapons isn't how they break themselves, but how they break the Legend of Zelda. The thing is that the open world in this game really is amazing. There is so much to explore, so much to see. But arguably, the only things really worth finding are the shrines. The other things just point to more shrines, which again basically amount to a piece of heart container each. The only other major thing worth hunting for are the story fragments. Yeah, in a dumb move, Nintendo decided to hide the story elements in just random places. Like seriously, why? These show off real character development for Princess Zelda, stuff that genuinely had me invested in her character. Why would you hide that? Why would you risk players not finding those? It is some of the best character development in the franchise. But hey, I guess they just needed more valuable stuff for us to find. Speaking of, I kind of feel like this world and the whole hunting stuff down would actually work a little bit better in another Nintendo franchise. I'm just saying, make it happen, Nintendo. Make it happen. But otherwise, there really isn't that much real reason to explore, other than just for the joy of exploration itself, which really does have its own merits in this game. But realistically, no matter how much you look, you're just going to end up finding more of these glass weapons. It makes looting and treasure hunting, well, kinda dull, which makes this whole amazing open world a little less exciting to explore, especially when it could take you a good while to trek from place to place. Yeah, the scale can kind of work against itself at times. And I really want you to stop and think about this for a moment. Finding new items in this Zelda game is boring. Really let that sink in. Zelda, the franchise that made finding an empty bottle exciting, somehow made finding a giant fire sword boring. Yeah. And the reason for that is that 90% of what you find is just expendable. You find chest after chest, but you never feel like you're progressing. Like you're getting farther, which really hurts. Even in the original Legend of Zelda, with its open world and non-linear progression and just sheer randomness of secrets, it still understood that every find needs to have real value. But here, well, it just feels like some of the charm of the way Link progresses, of what made Zelda special, is partially gone. Not a lot, but just a bit. But still, after all is said and done, as I stated at the beginning of the review, despite all my complaining, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is still an awesome game. The world is just breathtaking, a sight to behold. The music, amazing. And of course, the characters, the towns, they all still capture that classic Zelda feeling. A lot of what makes Zelda great is in this game. But I also think that's part of the problem. I found myself enjoying this game most when it felt like a Zelda game, solving puzzles, finding secrets, talking to goofy characters, smacking cuckoos around, and probably most of all, exploring. But when the game diverged from that, well, some of the new elements, they just didn't work. But hey, it happens. It's a shame, sure, but you can't tread new ground without leaving a few holes in your way. And I am not against the series shaking things up. I love it when Nintendo tries new things with their franchises. But this one just ended up losing a little bit of that charm that most Zelda games have. And it worries me that with all these perfect scores the game has received, that Nintendo might go further down the wrong direction, and we might end up losing everything that makes Zelda great. And I absolutely do not want that to happen. But regardless, I did enjoy this game. A lot. And I absolutely do recommend it. Not just to Zelda fans, but to all fans of open world adventure titles. But make no mistake, I did get lost in this world, got lost in the wonder, for a while. But the longer I was there, the more I was aware of what was missing. And that's really what holds it back. The Legend of Zelda, The Breath of the Wild is a brilliant game. But it's anything but perfect. Though, it does come closer than most. Hold everything. Link takes selfies in this game. 0 out of 10. Nope, that's it. 0 out of 10. Unredeemable.